podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. This is the Good Brothers. This is Justice Rajee.
And this is Majestic. My fault. I don't even use it as a blooper start or some shit. It was like kickboxing and shit like it.
Like, like what the fuck? All right, let's take it from the top.
All right.
Peace. This is the Good Brothers. I'm about to say I'm you. All right, let's do that one more time. And my brother is me. Peace. Okay. Peace. This is the Good Brothers. I'm Justice Rajee.
I'm Majestic.
And yeah, we're here again this week. We're just gonna get started. So as you know, I'm Majestic, and as other people may know, may or not, I don't know. But I've been moving in the midst of all of this, and I guess the final, when you really move,
Yeah.
I'm in the midst of that between the last 3 days. And so I thought maybe we could do a little recounting, a little reflection, a little talking about place, space, and places we've stayed. We were the first 3 years of us both living not at the place, somebody else, a parent was paying for. We lived together.
Yeah.
So therefore I thought there might be some insights, and also at an age that in our early, 19s to 20s, which is not a age that folks always are successful in living on their own, so to speak, at least in the terms of not getting a giant eviction and other things. But anyhow, so I thought maybe we could recount on that, and then see what could be found there. So to get us moving, to get us going, I wanted to ask a question. Let me get to my question here. We can start with, what's the first place you remember living growing up, where you're like, I live, over there or over here?
Or,
you don't got
good question. No. I mean, because I think one thing I think it's especially right now. I had a conversation with somebody a little earlier, really talking about when we get into recovery, where are people going to want to live, and where's going to be home, and what is that going to represent to people?
Mm-hmm.
When if you buy into the density argument, it's interesting. I've seen some articles just around COVID that they just don't buy into the density argument, which seems to make sense. But the only outliers, the places that are outliers, interesting in that, are Detroit and New Orleans. Neither of whom places are necessarily dense.
Yeah, they're not at all. Especially Detroit. I know Detroit enough.
Right.
I haven't been in New Orleans much, but
No, in Detroit and New Orleans is not dense in its classic sense, right? So there is, those two are outliers in the context of the density argument. But nonetheless, really looking at where people want to call home, and what, as we were discussing earlier, like the fear economy, what will that make people do, right? So I have really been thinking about the sense of place and sense of home. And, there's just a lot of stuff with Black folks where we, there's always this sense of place and this sense of home that you think about. Like even the fundamental term homeboy, right? Like literally being a place that people could say he's from where I'm from, right? We're homeboys. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that's kind of into the cultural DNA of us. So for me, the first place I remember living was 39 North 63rd Street. Family was interesting in that in 1950, my grandmother and grandfather that previously were living in North Philadelphia on Cambridge Street, they bought a duplex, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they bought a duplex, lived in the downstairs. Well, they rented a duplex, then eventually bought the entire duplex, right? So there were basically two-bedroom apartments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that almost like became a house to us.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think about like that's a really unusual place to kind of like get an idea of home, like because you got to go through the vestibule to get upstairs.
Yeah.
Like upstairs is not the traditional upstairs that people think. Upstairs is like go outside, lock the door, depending on the situation, then go upstairs, right?
Right.
Like and you, but you share the vestibule, right, with two other. It could be one other family, two other families, depending on the situation. So yeah, so that was our that was my first place of knowing as home. My mother was living in the kind of upstairs part of the duplex until like I think 80, 81, and then she moved. Then we moved to 235 North Hobart Street. So it was interesting because it was only one other family on the block that actually owned both parts of the duplex. And we were actually really close with them because their family came to the block really early. Right. So, but that was first. And I have thought about that, how the space that you first inhabit starts to frame also what you think of as normal. But that's what it was for me. What about you?
Yeah. For me, it was 210 Whittlesey Road, Trenton, New Jersey, up the street from the Cattle Water Park.
I used to see that. I used to see that on commercials,
which is not spelled anyway like the way I say it. Just in case you try to phonetically figure out what the hell that park is. I think it's like a Calder Water. I think it don't.
Yeah,
it's Cattle Water Park as far as I'm concerned, but it don't read that way when you look at it.
Yeah, for sure, actual fact.
And that's, I mean, that I guess as I was informed is actually I think the third place we lived as a family or unit or whatever. But it's the first place I remember living, and and then I was thinking about this when I posed drew up some of these questions like about living, because a part of the concept of living is sort of like where you're at, like where you spend time, where your family gathers, whatever your normal rhythm was. So for me, like that was the house I remember living in terms of like going to sleep, which was a solid block of brick row houses, 3 bedrooms, and it had like a garage, like an alley with a garage underneath in the back, and that's where they had the giant. All I remember is when you go downstairs, sometimes the giant water bugs would come out, and it was not pleasant. And I was like, like the joints with the black,
I know,
shiny
right?
backs.
Yeah, that when you crush them, shit come out of them. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Right?
joints. Ooh. And but between there and my grandfather stayed, not maybe a mile, I guess. I think a mile or so away on the other side of Cattle Water Park, at Bruce Park Drive.
Now I remember going to his house.
Yeah, because you came with me to his house a couple times. And so most of my real young childhood was between Whittlesey Road, his house, and my aunt's house, who she lived. I can't remember. It's off of Stuyvesant, but I always forget the street. But it was directly across from Mercer County Hospital, which was where I was born. So it was like a triangle. You know what I'm saying? If we was anywhere, we was one of them 3 places.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? At all times. And then, for a time in there also my aunt, my other aunt, my uncle's first children's mother, my Aunt Debbie, at her house. But those other, really my grandmother. So that's the frame of reference in my mind of like where you started life. And the odd thing was my grandfather's house, like the exact same house as the house on Whittlesey Road. So to me, that's what all houses was like. You know what I'm saying? Like houses was like that, and then apartments was like my aunt's and her joint was like it was a 3-story building. There was an apartment on the first floor, and her apartment was the second floor, and like then there was like one room in the attic. And that's what it was my cousin's room, and that so like it was still sort of a row house structure, but it was on the second floor. So in my mind, this is how all houses was.
Right. And so I want to ask you about that. Just one small thing about that idea of proximity, because you make a very interesting point around you remember living here, your grandfather lived over here, your aunt lived over here. So it's a triangle, and that triangle I would estimate wasn't more than a 2-mile triangle.
No.
Right.
Yeah, and probably 2 miles.
Right, between them all, right? But it was and very similarly, where my grandmother lived, where my mother moved, and then where we moved later, still was no more than a mile and a half. The first one was probably 5-6 blocks, and the second one was no more than a mile. So it's interesting when you think about families of that time and dealing with proximity, right? And like the strength of proximity, and then the familiarity that then breeds a place, because you have this triangle or this, this, where does someone live? Well, this person live over here. And I had an aunt that lived between where my grandmother lived and where we went to live later. And then I had another great aunt who lived between 2 more houses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting thing that I do question young people of today. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of young people who have this exact same situation, but a lot of times when you move outside of the place where you have a lot of family, quote unquote, physical family, this idea of the proximity of homes and then how you learn to navigate space based on proximity of homes. But
yeah, well, and I would say what definitely changed is after, like I said, when we moved from Trenton after my father died and moved to Willingboro, it was like we was in that triangle and then we jumped 23 miles down the river, so to speak. So even though we would be, pretty fairly frequently, over every other weekend, back, and even I was, going to school still in Trenton for a while. Like over time, that distance, it didn't get any further in actual space. It got further, what I mean, as we got older, what I mean, because you get more into the loop of where you're at every day. And, when you live 6, 7 minutes, 10 minutes from somebody, it's not a big deal to be like, oh, we're going to pop over to Pops. Oh, okay. I'll get my coat. Get your, your mom, get your jacket. We're going over to your grandma. Like, oh, okay. You know what I'm saying? But when you 25 minutes away, everybody takes a breath before they say we're gonna pop over to anywhere.
right,
right. Like, do I really want to drive across, over there? Or if you got to travel by other means, transit and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, do I really want to go wait for this bus and do this and do that? It's like, nah, I'm good. We're gonna go on Sunday. Like, we come through on Saturday. You know what I'm saying? Afternoon, we're gonna go over there. We're not gonna do that this weekend. And or so where I started with that was just thinking about sort of how your early the spaces you remember growing up sort of shapes your expectations and what you think is where kind of how you perceive where you fit. You know what I mean? It's like I always remember the last place I stayed, crib I had in Pittsburgh, and before I left, it was a 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't super big or nothing, but when a couple folks came down from Mecca, and I remember because we were having a family day or something, I can't remember who traveled with me to get some stuff from our apartment, and she was like, "Wow, this is a big apartment. Like, this is gigantic." And for those that don't know, Mecca is Harlem,
right.
And you know what I'm saying? But the general idea, like someone from a place like New York, where, space is smaller, this not really big in the grand scheme of things, apartment seems like like wow, like y'all got lots of room. You got a hallway, there's a bathroom down there, and kitchen. You got space for a washroom. I mean, so like your proximity and your expectations are different. You know what I mean? And I didn't live on the Center Avenue. I ain't live in the upper reaches of the Pinkies Outlands. You know what I'm saying, of Pittsburgh. But so with that, I wanted to pivot to what's something that you sort of recall about what I mean, your neighborhood or place you live, especially like under 18, like 8-10 years old.
Yeah.
Anything that like stood out?
What's interesting, and I think not in some senses American architecture is like this, in the structure of American cities, is you remember the sameness, right? So regardless, sometimes if you live in the suburbs or you live in the city, there's a sameness that happens, right? And so for me, between 8 and 10, between 5 and then 13, we lived on 235 North Hobart Street, about 4 blocks away from where my grandmother lived. But in those 4 blocks, it was a way different 4 blocks. Philadelphia is like one of them places that you cross a street and the socioeconomic change emerges without you even being aware. So like where we came up from, I'm gonna say damn near 46th Street, 45th Street, all the way to 60th Street was like one way. But once you cross 60th Street, the families got older. I think it emerged from like when people first got there, and like even in this idea of like you got this wide swath of blackness, but in that wide swath of blackness, you had some folks who were working class, you had some folks that were working middle class, and you had some folks that were middle class. Now they all live within a mile of each other, right? And I think that's a uniqueness that happens in cities. Yeah. But like it changed. So where my mother moved, and I now know shit, everything happened in my life is political. My mother got her opportunity to buy her home because my Uncle Charles and my pop were working in housing. And at that point in Philadelphia, they were doing what they did in a lot of cities in the early 80s, where they would sell you a home for $250 if you proved that you had the money to rehab it. So my mother bought her house for $250, rehabbed it, right? So in 81, she buys the house for $250. In 90, she sells it for $30,000, right? So, but that was because she was able to get a rehab because my uncle and my pop were in house, they were in the housing arena. So she was able to get this rehab, get access to the folks who could rehab a house, and then she owned it, right? So it's an example of something that, I'm gonna be honest, you don't see a lot of Black folks do, and I struggle with it sometimes. Like there are times that I go with this whole like, let me go buy something and rehab it, right? And so then get all the equity, right?
Yeah.
Because all the equity belongs to me.
Yeah.
Versus the ease of motion of moving into something that's already fixed, right? I live next door. Where I live next door, there's somebody bought a house that was literally down to the studs. They've rehabbed it. In the rehab, now rehab probably costs a couple $100,000, but literally the house that was worth maybe $30,000 now probably worth $330, $340, right? So there is something to be said for that equity building, right?
Yeah.
And it's the equity building because of what you put into it, and then you own it straight out. So then, like I said, the stuff that comes from it is all yours, right? And in those kind of situations, often you create a whole nother level of wealth for your family. So anyway, so we lived about four and a half blocks from my grandmother. Totally different situation. My block, we had my grandmother's block. We didn't have no crack houses. On our block, we didn't have one, but on the block next to us, Wanamaker Street, there were 3. So just to put it in context. So it was an entirely different experience, only a half a mile away, right? Which really kind of was really interesting, again, to frame for me that Black people could all be Black and be in very similar situations, but have very different things happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that experience. So that sameness of all the houses look the same, right? Literally. The only difference is the numbers on the house, right? Did somebody get the numbers that's like made out of glass, or do you have the metal numbers, right? Like, but besides that, we are all dealing with essentially the same issue. And then also the density, which then I liked. I don't, to be honest, I wouldn't probably like it today, but the density and possibilities that came from that density. That's what I remember. What about you?
Well, by then we were living in Willingboro, which is it's a suburb, plat, you know what I mean, with houses, yards, and all that, curvy streets that names that are confusing that run into each other, and they all start with the same letter. It's good. The whole the crafting of space that makes it difficult for people who don't live there regularly to navigate. You know what I mean? That's all intentional and structured. You know what I mean? That those communities that are built that way. The thing I remember most at that time was still one the transitioning between Willingboro and Trenton, for family, but being riding by my bike, there was no, there may be people, not having the best of times, but there were no crack houses in Willingboro, that at least none that I knew of. It was, in terms of at least the general perception, there was no sense of a lack of safety. In terms of if you like, oh, I'm going outside and I'm running around. Like, besides the regular interpersonal stuff of being a kid, but there wasn't any like, nobody was trying to establish their drug ring and coordinate control of a neighborhood by force or proxy. You know what I'm saying? In my general space day to day. But also I guess the thing I always remember about my street specifically though too was there weren't a lot of kids when we first moved to that street, but as we were there, more kids, more families with kids, moved on our street. And then there was a fair amount of just like families, like it was like a grandparent, couple at the corner, and like their family, their kids and stuff would come to the house sometimes. And these other, just generally seeing, regular people, mostly, these I perceive to be working class people, just living life, like nothing fancy. Maybe somebody had, we got them persnickety rules that people think make stuff valuable. Like you got to paint numbers on you at the bottom of your driveway and shit. So if your number wasn't painted, they send you like a nasty letter. Like, hey man, you need to touch up the paint on your letter. And it'd be like, all right, we gonna get around to that. The but it also was in general, even though there wasn't a lot of kids on my street, there were a lot of kids. A lot of, others. So we riding bikes, we, going playing basketball, all the stuff that you think kids should do, going to the woods, which, it's just playing in the swamp. I don't know if they did that in West Philly, but
no, they only did that down Penrose and down when they built it on the swamp. It took me years to, again, it's difficult for this stuff to be divorced from what you learn, like up Logan and down Penrose when people's houses would start going into the ground, right? Because it was built on a fucking river, creek, or swamp. Right, so people build wealth, right? People spend their money to live somewhere, and then you find out your crib is built on a swamp. And then in Penrose, they had the nerve. People in Penrose had never think they was better than the rest of us because they moved out to a swamp.
Well, this new territory.
No. And so it's hard to divorce some of this sense of home from the politics and the structures that have so much to do with that. In that, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
For people that don't know that are listening, Willingboro is really kind of seminally important in the Black suburban experience. there's arguments on its place as far as being the first black suburb or is undoubtedly one of the first. There's some places in Illinois and some other places that I think outside of Kansas City and stuff like that they say kind of came a little before, but at least on the East Coast, Willingboro was known as like the suburban black town.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right. Which was also always fascinating to me, right? Because I'm from a place where, again, you got multi-class black. Philadelphia is a multi-class black city. Let's not get it messed up. However, even if black folks doing okay in your city, they still live in the city. So this whole idea, and even we had Yaden, which was a suburb, but it was like a first ring suburb that white folks just left. Like, so it felt different. It's different than like a city where white folks leave.
Yeah.
Versus black folks is there. So, for my benefit, but also for the benefit of the listeners, it kind of tell me about what that felt like to grow up in like a black suburban town.
So, I mean, I remember, I guess the place I was starting. So we used to go to Willingboro to see my mom's, one of my mom's, best friends growing up. She was a teacher in Willingboro School. Rest in peace to my cousin Nikki. And she was a teacher in Willingboro, and she lived there. So we used to go to her house, like to hang out a couple of times, like on a Saturday afternoon to the evening. Moms would go over there and they would have mom talk and drink wine, and do their thing, and then me and my cousin, brother, and my other cousin, we would, we might play or do whatever. You know what I'm saying? But it was so it wasn't totally foreign to me. When we moved there, it wasn't like, oh, you left this brick row house and then you moved to this. You know what I'm saying? But it was the first thing I remember was sort of you have a different flow, right? When you go into like the way a city is like a grid and every street goes into another, and, Trenton ain't, black metropolis like the large, it ain't 10,000 square blocks of city, but every intersection is something happening. There's a block, there's a corner, there's another building, there's no, there's open space, there's a park or some type of facility or something. You drive to, just to drive to get to Willingboro, you got to go on a highway, 130, 13 through Bucks County, later 295. Right, so you leave fully like the city and you drive through this other stuff, and things that you did, if you're going on 130 back in them days, it's car dealerships and these different shopping centers, right? And then, later you learn that every time there's a shopping center, you're in proximity to some other suburb, right? You don't know that when you're a kid. You're a kid, just like, oh, look, there's a Caldor or, a Kmart. Look at that Kmart.
You said Caldor.
Caldor.
Man.
Jefferson Ward.
Boscov's. Montgomery Ward. Jefferson Ward. We had Montgomery Ward. You had Boscov's. You had Caldor, which you only seen over in Jersey. See, God, they used to be like exotic. When oh man,
I didn't know
the New Jersey stores. They used to be so exotic to us, man. Like, what is this? Like, what is the two things that was exotic to us? One was them certain jug handles y'all had.
Oh yeah, you gotta love the Jersey jug handles, man.
Yeah, the jug handles. Pennsylvania, if you know, Pennsylvania had jug handles, right?
I mean, right, you can turn left, man.
Man. And then Boscov's, I remember Boscov's, in Caldor, and I mean, to say nothing about the name of y'all malls, it's just, Runnymede. Was Runnymede, right? Yeah, Runnymede is in Jersey.
Yeah, but that's further south. I ain't never really been there.
Okay, yeah. Again, those were just, that's the...
Yeah, but that is definitely us off the spur of the pat line.
Subconscious. That's the subconscious of my commercials. My time watching TV.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because that's it.
Runnymede, like like all those names are burnt into my head. Places that I have never been. Right, I still have never been to any of them places.
I ain't never been to Deptford Mall either. Yeah. But I know where it is. But I ain't never
Deptford Mall, Runnymede, and it's a Granite Run that was out our way. But like just like. Yeah, man. So So I do remember that. Yeah.
So you get so you drive by that, right? And then, I've learned more, especially now. Because this Willingboro is it is, 15 minutes from being in Northeast Philadelphia. So 15, 20 minutes I can get to Franklin Mills. Actually Franklin Mills is oddly enough almost closer to my house than like Cherry Hill Mall.
It is way closer to you than it was to me.
Yeah. And I guess now Parks, because that's where the casino is over there. That one, at least one of them. That's the one I know.
Yeah.
Right. So, but growing up, it was because those stores and those shopping centers, those spaces, and then you would see, you might see a golf course sign, you might see like other stuff that I knew wasn't Trenton stuff, or at least I didn't know. I knew where because my mom worked at the state hospital, and oddly, my grandfather's house is close to the state hospital, and so was our house. There's a like Trenton something golf club that's like behind south of the state hospital, so I used to see that sign because we used to drive by it. So like I knew these different things existed, but I don't know nothing about them. When I moved to Willingboro, there's a neighborhood that's got a golf course in it. You know what I'm saying? And like black people golf there. You know what I'm saying? And to a large degree, not myself, but other black people. So we get there, and it's just I don't really know. I was pretty young, so I was like 7, 8 years old, so I didn't totally know what to think about the space. But when we moved there, my understanding is that the township was still significantly black, but it was not all the way. It wasn't like over 50%.
Oh, really?
At least I don't know. At least that's my understanding. But by the time when I got to school, second grade, it was 15, black and brown kids, and then like 3, 4 white kids, and then somebody, maybe an Asian brother and sister in there or something else. You know what I mean? And all through elementary school. So the school age kids was getting blacker and blacker and blacker.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? And then so some of the significant things is one, I had lots of black teachers. My first 2 principals was black. You know what I mean? Let's see, 1, 2, 3. I think I had 3 black female teachers. Like I said, first 2 principals black. Some of my counselors. It's just a lot of black people. You know what I'm saying? That are working folks, and a fair amount lived in Willingboro or lived in the area. Right. So then the other orientation is something I wrestle with, and I know because people, I try to understand when other folks who their perception of what a suburb is and what a suburb isn't is somewhat informed with how suburbs function where they're from. And I wonder sometimes, being from New Jersey, and this is the thing I understand about Willingboro more now than I did then, is that it is a suburb, and it is a suburb of Philly, but it's sort of far enough north that it's not too far from being a suburb of something else. Right. So, you know what I mean? So, a lot of folks from Philly or had family in Philly, or Philly being their center point, lived in Willingboro, and I met a lot of more kids from Philly actually than I did when I lived in Trenton, which I guess that's probably just because that's how Trenton is. But then, his kids, my people's in Newark, my people's in Plainfield, my people's in New York, or we moved here from New York, or we moved here from somewhere else in North Jersey. You know what I mean? Into where you moved here from somewhere way out. And, at least I had a sense of that the families that moved themselves there, similar to my mom moving us there, it was a sense of trying to put your kids in a place that you hope was a little better situation. We almost live in Willingboro. We were going to be, I guess it was a place in Burlington Township or something, which is not far, which I thought was the only place, Burlington Coat Factory, because that's where the first one was. I thought that was the only one that existed for most of my life. But, so, you drive by, so then, I remember riding the bus in Trenton, you know what I mean, as a kid. And I remember not ever being able to ride the bus in Willingboro because there really wasn't you couldn't really get around the town. You couldn't go grocery shopping and shit like that on the bus. It wasn't.
They got a light rail now, right? They got a light rail stop. They got a light rail.
It's light rail. Yeah, it's light rail. it doesn't stop in. It stops in. It's on the river line, so it's just west of the 130.
Okay.
So it goes goes Camden up to Trenton and stops like. So Beverly is the closest joint. It's like 9 minutes drive, 10-minute drive to get over there, but it doesn't like run through Willingboro, but it's Willingboro adjacent, I guess you could say.
Okay.
But that didn't even exist in the that definitely didn't exist in the 80s, man. It was all you need to get a ride. We about to, we're going up to see, we're going to Pops, and then we're going to drive back. You know what I mean? It was no hanging out. And then the only other, even once we moved down there, my aunt, like I said, they lived on the other side of town, which wasn't super far, but you ain't really want to walk over there if you ain't have to. You know what I mean? It was like,
right.
2.5, 3 mile walk, and it wasn't no like straight line. You had to walk out, weaving around.
He was like, stand by me and shit. It was like Boys in the Hood when they was walking through LA.
Straight up, man.
Walking through a train line, drinking, you know what I'm saying? Going through a train tracks and going over there. Nah, that's
so then the orientation and everything is different because you go like, I can't remember the name of the store, but there's a grocery store in Trenton, not far from Mercer County Hospital, my aunt's house, that we used to go to sometimes, right? And that was like the supermarket that was in the city, kind of like in Trenton. And then there was the supermarket heading to Ewing, which is the first ring suburb around Trenton. And there was like a Super Fresh. It was nicer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Fresh. And I used to remember, sometimes we just need to grab something. You'd be like, we going over to so-and-so's, and that store didn't look as nice. They had like, it looked old. I mean, quite frankly, it looked like it was built, 40 years ago. It was big when it was new, but now, by the 80s, when Super Fresh was around, and they had the green awnings and the fucking angled fronts and shit, and like, ooh, Super Fresh. I bet you the food's better in there. I don't know. You know what I mean? I started to get the sense of the difference in the way even the space is structured, you know what I mean? And that there is a perceived or real difference in like the quality of what you're going to get. You know what I mean? At this store versus that store. I mean, if you got the time and the money, or at least you got the time, go to the nicest store. But if you ain't got the time, you go to the other store. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or there's some extra shit with going to the other store too, because it's like, there's other activity going on on the store
the other store. No, to your point, the other store is always complicated, right? Because the other store, so the other store can be two different ways, right? Like, so where my grandmother lived and where we still have a house is basically on the border between Philadelphia and Upper Darby, which is in Delaware County, right? So like literally I live at the end, grew up at the end of Philadelphia. And so you could go outside to this largely Irish suburb, right? But you could go out during the day to the shopping district. You couldn't go out at night. There were rules that like you couldn't go out at night. One of my uncle's best friends went out at night and got beat up in a way that he never was the same. His man Frank never was the same, man. And that's crazy. I'm saying that because I ain't thought about that in so long. Again, these are the shit that comes with like the things that we accept, right? As normal. So yeah, you couldn't go at night, but you could go during the day. And so the supermarkets in the suburb. Now, here's an interesting postscript to that conversation. Upper Darby is now the most diverse zip code, a set of zip codes in Pennsylvania. Yes.
Wow.
From different countries in the world. It has become entirely different from even 25 years ago. They have marts from everywhere, and a white person still living in Upper Darby. like it is seriously, it is unreal, man. But yeah, so like the other market versus the market in the neighborhood that you implicitly know is not going to have the stuff that you need. Yeah. They're not, a big thing for me was my grandmother. My mother, she was an early adopter of Ocean Spray cranberry juice. So we was drinking Ocean Spray in the 80s.
Man, I like the Ocean Spray.
Real black bougie types.
So like, you live at large, you get the Ocean Spray.
Yo,
you go, you have one though a month.
When they said the cran raspberry, let me tell you something. When the cran raspberry dropped, when the cran grape and the cran raspberry dropped, like, I ain't had to drink that strong ass cranberry juice no more. when that grape and that high fructose corn syrup hit my, ooh man, let me tell you something.
Yeah, the cranberry juice cocktail, because I didn't know. Remember, there was a difference between the regular cranberry. There was cranberry and cranberry juice cocktail.
Well, that's the thing. That the cranberry juice cocktails what you got when you went to Pathmark. See, when you went to Pathmark, you got the cranberry juice cocktail. When you went to them other supermarkets, where my mom would go to the other supermarkets, that's when you would go. You could find cranberry juice or cran grape or Pepperidge Farm muffins, right? Or Entenmann's. I know you remember that term.
Yeah, I know about the Entenmann's. You gotta get the Entenmann's crunch.
You gotta get the crumb cake. Come on, the crumb cake. When you get the crumb cake and some ice cream, you know what I mean? Like, you got a whole full out celebration, right? That's when you did something good. Mine got some extra paper, right? So like, it's interesting. So then my mother never went to the supermarket or barely went to the supermarket 2 blocks from us. It was a super fresh. So here's the flip side of what you're saying, right? We never went to the one 2 blocks from us because it was one of those things, and now I'm understanding around 1980s enterprise zone and redevelopment of black neighborhoods, right? History repeats itself. They were putting supermarkets in. And so you would have, supermarket folks who ran supermarket, and they would, put a supermarket in, and then they were running to the challenges of supermarkets. Supermarkets are a high volume, low margin business. Yeah. I know all of this now. I didn't know this.
Right.
Meaning when you steal something, it really hurts.
Yeah.
Right? Because the whole thing is I sell a lot of this and I have a low margin, but I did enough volume that it makes sense. But you put it in a neighborhood that people are suffering from a whole bunch of other challenges.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why they take it and rob it blind, and then the margins go down. So as the margins go down, they don't clean it as much. It starts to smell like cardboard. You ever been in a supermarket smell like cardboard?
Yeah.
And you know that the end is near. When supermarkets smell like cardboard, like you just know that people are not taking care of it. Like smell like wet cardboard in the back.
Yeah.
So yeah, we live 2 blocks away from a supermarket that we never went to, right? And again, this sense of home, this sense of place, right? This is you're building on. That this is just expanding in my head about all those experiences that you take for granted. You might have a whole bunch of other experiences. You leave a house and all that kind of stuff. But whether you're talking about you walking 2-3 miles to somebody's house, or I don't know if you've watched the John Forte Talib Kweli interview on his podcast.
Not yet, but it's not yet. But it's on my. I'm going to listen.
It's interesting for a variety of reasons, but one thing I'll share about it, and for all those who are listening, is interesting that one thing he talks about, Talib Kweli and John Forte, is being young and having to catch public transportation, and how that gives you a lens into your city in a way that you can't replace. But you only really have to do it if your school forces you to, because you got to go to like another school outside your neighborhood. So it's I won't give it away, but it's an interesting conversation.
I have to check that out. Yeah, that's on my list. But I think and that's because the other thing, so as we get, what's the other joint? Pathmark, Acme, ShopRite. You know what I mean? Basically the thing as I grew up in Willingboro, right? And you get a sense of like, all right, Willingboro is whatever class lane Willingboro holds, right? And You got that, and then you realize it's like the other suburbs, they got like a whole nother level that they don't really want you. They like basically it became like, yeah, y'all go over there to Willingboro. Don't y'all come over here. Don't move over here to especially Medford. Medford is the one that sticks out as like because we just stopped going there. That as being the most virulently like stay out of our neighborhood. Our little suburb. Whether
now,
that was earned or not.
Was there a difference between Medford and Medford Lakes? Or were they the same?
I think there's some small nuance between them, which, as far as we were concerned, they both said Medford in it, and so that meant we don't go over there, we don't travel there. You know what I'm saying? Now they're not necessarily close, but the thing that became a part of sort of the geography of like getting, shit you do with with your mom and your mom friend or your aunt, whoever she kick it with when you were a kid. You know what I mean? So you go to the Pennsauken Mart, which was a close one. You go to Berlin Mart. Columbus Mart. You know what I'm saying? The Marts was the, you know what I mean? You know about the Berlin Mart.
I'm gonna tell you about the Berlin Mart in a minute after you go through it.
You know what I'm saying? So the Marts, the Marts for I think they're the thing most equivalent to sort of like swap meets on the West Coast or street vendors in a city that's dense that has street vendors. You know what I'm saying? The Marts are the most equivalent thing to that if you live in a what I realize now, a suburban and rural space. You know what I'm saying? Because some of them places that are, in between places that we call suburbs, I realize now, like Pemberton, all that shit around Fort Dix, out to Lakewood, and that shit is rural. That ain't no damn suburb. That is next to farms. You know what I'm saying? But because of this, the structure of social context, and especially of Black people, especially in the Northeast, if you there, it can't be a farm. It can't be rural if you there. So therefore, it's a suburb. Even though, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a real, like, even though you 35 minutes from Willingboro, right?
Right.
Not 35 minutes from North Philly. You 35 minutes from Willingboro, and you like, yeah, we live in the suburbs. Suburb of what?
Right.
You live next. You are the town.
but I think that's an interesting point. That how can people engage their sense of where's their sense of location coming out of the South into the North, right? Yeah. In this idea that wherever I'm at, it can only either be the hood or a suburb,
right? Like there's only two spaces.
Yeah, those are only two spaces, right? Like the idea once you came out the South that you can't live in a rural space, which is fascinating, given how many of us were in that space. Now, so just that, I think that's a really important part to bring up because, again, I think that's talking about according to what makes sense in your experience, what kind of options and opportunities do you have, right? So for the listeners, he again, he's opening up all these interesting chambers. We probably going to do a part 2, man, because we are. We didn't got stuck on our childhood.
Yeah, we didn't even get to our own cribs yet.
We ain't got to our cribs. We ain't got to how growing up as high school kids. But I think so. For me, to your point about the marts. So when you grow up in a space where it's dense as all get out. So and when we was coming up, and still is to this day, like I was talking about 69th Street out Upper Darby, that was a clothing and that was a basic strip of commerce.
Yeah.
60th Street was a street of commerce. 56th Street. 56th Street had some streets, some stuff on it. It wasn't commerce. 52nd Street was the main street of West Philadelphia. Lancaster Avenue, Haverford. As you think about all this density you get, right? So you think about when you need to go find sneakers, you go to 60th Street. If that don't make sense there, you go down 52nd Street. If that don't make sense, you go to Lancaster Avenue, right? You go to these different places to find what you need, right? If you really feeling froggy, which we didn't at that junction in our lives, you go down Woodland Avenue, right? Like if you really feeling like you want to have a problem with somebody. So like you have all these places. So then my mom went to work in Jersey in the 80s, which was also very instructive to me. I I think has influenced a lot of my understanding of place because she went to work in Camden, and now I like to not use hyperbolic terms to describe places, but anyone who understands Camden, New Jersey in the 80s has some context of what I'm talking about, and maybe we'll get you some links to situate you, to locate you about my point.
Yes, sir.
Man, my mother used to come home so stressed, man, in retrospect. That job was so difficult for her, man. Like, she used to have to go in and snatch people's kids out their houses. That was in the throes of the drug epidemic.
Yeah.
Right? And when you got to go and the stuff people were seeing in Camden, which was unlike most of what you was even seeing in Philadelphia, unless you was down the Badlands or certain places. She used to just come home and just be like, yo, I just want to watch TV. And as a kid, I used to be like, oh, LA Law, huh? All right. Fuck it. Okay. You waiting for Spencer for Hire, huh? Hawk about to come on, huh? Okay. Like, Frank's Place about to come on, right? Like, but in now, retrospect, yeah, because you was going into the wildest situations possible with your sense of caring for Black people and caring for poor people and having to do the unspeakable. Watching people who were doing unmentionable things and having to try to, what you thought of is help and care for their children.
Yeah.
But part of that was then she learned Jersey, right? So like stuff that for most of us, like a good number of the people I graduated high school with now live in Jersey, right? Jersey is like really normal to Philadelphia now. But back then, Jersey wasn't normal to Philadelphia, right? Yeah. Like maybe a little bit of Lawnside, maybe a little bit of Lindenwold, a little bit, Willingboro, right? Because Black folks wasn't moving to Camden. And you damn sure wasn't moving to Pennsauken, because only people moving to Pennsauken was from Camden. Like, and so we used to go to all these really, really unique places. So I remember the first time my mom took us to Berlin Mart. And that's why when you said about the rural, it was interesting because my first pair of real Timbs that I bought was from the Berlin Mart. And they were the Euro hikers. And you couldn't find the Euro hikers nowhere else, really. But the reason you could find the Euro hikers in the Berlin Mart is because they were selling camouflage clothes and hunting gear.
Yeah.
They were selling guns and shit. So that was part of the uniform. Because it was in a rural place.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember being there. We would go get some food, or they would have all the stalls, right? And you would just see the different stalls, and you go and then you go. And I remember the shoe place. And the shoe place, again, it wasn't like they had all the Timberlands they had in Philadelphia, because they didn't have none of the Timberlands they had in Philadelphia, because they wouldn't sell you the Timberlands they had in Philadelphia.
Right.
They wasn't wearing that shit.
They was wearing clientele.
No, they was wearing camouflage, Jack, and they have to be brown and gold to match with the outfit. So, again, sometimes the most interesting pathways can lead you to have another experience. And the other experience I had was being able to experience like Cinnaminson, New Jersey, like us going to flea markets over there, us going to consignment shops, like all different kind of experiences that New Jersey had. That Philadelphia, the main line had it, but that we didn't have, but because of that job.
So we had a momentary technical reality pop up. So we're going to take a break and give you a second, I guess, an ad of sorts. So the Good Brothers is an extension of the work of the Asher Oldhead podcast and the Asher Oldhead project. So this is a collaboration with me and my brother, I'm Majestic, and we're going to keep going in the midst of this moment to stay connected and to share, the realities of our connection and how we move and see the world as brothers in mind in these days and time. So if you enjoy, you like this addition to the podcast, send me a message. Send the word to me on any of the platforms at Justice Rajee, on Twitter, on Instagram, on whatever. Facebook page if you ever use it. No one seems to. But also, I guess I haven't done the greatest job of getting you there. In any event, please share your thoughts, and also please head to the Etsy shop, grab you a t-shirt, grab you a hoodie, something. That is how I fund and keep the doors open conceptually here in terms of the project and what we're doing. So more to come on the concept and the reality of art to culture. But with that, let's get into the last few minutes of this episode. Peace. So, Guy, could you finish your thoughts on the Berlin Mart?
Yeah, man. Just this idea of the proximity of urban, suburban, and rural, because Camden is urban as a motherfucker. Pennsauken, Willingboro, all these things are suburban. And then you got this rural place in context, but it's all still within 15, 20 minutes, depending on traffic, of coming out of Philadelphia. So just the varying experiences you have and the sense of place that you get as a young person was really important.
Yeah. And so I'll kind of close our this first chapter on this with this and centering on the marts, because the start reality that I especially came to know. So Pennsauken Mart being the one we went to the most, because that was really it was close. You know what I mean? Berlin Mart was like Saturday we're gonna go to the Berlin Mart. Like we're gonna make this 30-40 minute ride as I perceived it, deeper into the parts of New Jersey that I don't really understand, to go, to these stalls. But those places, and then Columbus Mart, which was north of us, out like 206 going towards Fort Dix and McGuire Air Force Base, you know what I'm saying? And so it's a lot of different people out there because of the military bases. You know what I mean? So you had, all types of, lots of black people, lots of, Puerto Rican, other folks probably spoke Spanish. Puerto Rican most predominantly, at least in my mind at that time. And then, but those counter to sort of the other commercial spaces, and then that like a mall, the marts felt more, you had stuff like you could get a Yo Baby Yo t-shirt, you know what I'm saying, or you get you a fake Tag Heuer watch, you know what I'm saying, or you get them the girls could get them pictures, you know what I'm saying, with they get the hair done and they all get the pictures together, you know what I'm saying, you get a tattoo. You could get a slice of pizza and a bag of donuts. You know what I'm saying? There was a whole lot of stuff going on in the Pennsauken Mart. You know what I mean? But it was definitely more of a, it was not an unfamiliar place when I went there. You know what I mean? For the first time, I was like, oh, okay, I know what this is. This is like, you know what I'm saying, when you go up 125th Street and it's everybody got different people got different stuff. And, you know what I mean? Or this is like going these and the funny thing is, outside of the gallery, a couple times somewhere in North Philly we went. I mean, I used to hear about going to 52nd Street to shop, but I ain't know nobody to take me to 52nd Street to shop. So I was like, man, 52nd Street might as well be Mars, man. I don't know where that is. No, like, I have no frame of reference to go to 52nd Street to buy no sneakers.
That's fair.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, it wasn't it seemed like a long way. I'm like, we got Pro Sneaks right there on 130. You know what I'm saying? I think it was an Indian couple that owned. You know what I mean? I found plenty of nice sneakers at Pro Sneaks. And then there was a spot I always actually remember. It was a store in downtown Burlington, like Burlington City, that sold, sneakers. At least for a time, I think they went out of business. But I remember them having like a whole rack of Jordans. You know what I'm saying? It was like in the joint. I ain't never wearing no Jordans, but I seen them. Yeah, I mean, so sort of I think I'd like us to close just thinking about like the realities of your social economic situation, right? Even if you're in a space that is clearly, we were able to move there because my mother and my grandmother bought a home together. You know what I'm saying? Where my mom would not have been able to buy a home on a borough by herself. So we were a 2-income family in structure, more or less, even though, you know, it was not like, you know, I mean, a parental couple or whatever. But still, you know, our overall threshold was not, and nor was it was not the whatever sometimes I feel like people think a suburb looks like or experience lives is like for the, you know, I'm sure there are, and I've seen places where people, you know, I've come to learn actually now in life that other people's perception of like of nice and of house size and everything else, it can be wildly different than what you think is nice or is, you know, appropriate. And then also all the other political and social stuff that goes into why someone wants to live there. Right. Versus these other places. You know, especially, you know, as it pertains to us, like of either trying to stay away from our people. You know, and you know, other, you know, beyond the creature comforts, like I'd like to have a grass. I want to have some yard. I want to plant a garden. Like these are all things that people may be into, but I want to close us on sort of the going and moving through that space sort of shaped my expectations and gave me this question about like where do you belong? Because, you know, I would say definitely growing up in Willingboro was a big motivation for me not to want to live in Willingboro. Yeah, I'm saying, and wanting to go at least go to school or leave to go live in a more city environment where I could get transit, where I could walk to, you know, theoretically walk to some kind of job or whatever. Just, you know, because the other side, and this is something, especially as I got older, when I would go home, you know, it ain't like you could. There's nowhere in Willingboro to go like, yo, I want to go have a drink and talk to people. I mean, there were some places now, and there were some more clandestine places, I guess, growing up that I would know about because I wasn't old enough. But it was not the like, I'm just going to drive out to so-and-so Avenue and see what's happening. You know what I'm saying? Unless that so-and-so Avenue was, I'm going to drive to Philly.
Right.
And see what's happening. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't a 15 minutes, 20 minutes from here, I could just pop up and see what's cracking. You know what I mean? It's like, nah, like, especially not 10 minutes. There was none of that. You know what I mean? It was no where people were, you know, interpersonally, people might be doing social things, but there's just a different dynamic when you live in a city. You know what I mean? And it's not the same day to day as living in a suburb, and especially a suburb that's like a bedroom community like Willingboro. Like when you get there, you're there. You know what I'm saying? But you can't just like walk into some other interesting and curious finds. So, so with that, you know, I need folks to listen into the part 2 as we're going to continue this journey, talking about place and space, and how it shaped us. Yeah, man, take the best part for yourself. Any word you want to close with?
No, I think you just dropped it. I think we'll continue to go through it, but I just think what you just really shared about not taking the idea of suburb versus urban for granted, and number one, don't assume that suburb equals white and urban equals black, because we see that that's fundamentally changing.
Absolutely. So with that, I'm gonna say thank you. I'm Jessica for joining me, adding on the cipher tonight, and we will get this one out soon, and we'll add on again in the near future.
My man, thank you for having me, man. Peace.
Indeed. Peace. Thank you for listening to The Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic, for joining me. This is part 1 of our conversation around moving in place and space. So check in, not even next week, actually shortly after, for part 2 should be coming right up behind this one. Thank you to all of you, the listeners. Thank you to Copper Consulting. Thank you to Black Man Green Plan, who joined us last week. Hopefully we'll be back soon. Thank you to everyone out there doing their best to take care of themselves and their families and their communities in the midst of what we're working with right now in this COVID situation. Stay strong, stay positive, use your skills, use your mind. Always take the best part for yourself. Thank you for listening. Peace.